Hello, everyone, and we are back with another interview for the Self Marriage series. And today we're here with LaBouff from Las Vegas. Thanks so much for agreeing to do this interview with me, Britlin.
It is one of my deepest passions to talk about anything that fortifies the self. So thank you for inviting me on.
Of course. And you said that you married yourself right around Valentine's Day in 2018. Can you share with us what inspired that decision?
Yeah, it was actually pretty spontaneous. I had never even really contemplated the idea of self marriage, but the happenings, I guess I have to lay out some backstory. So I was
Yeah.
at this movement and songwriting retreat in Hawaii. And I discovered along that 4 day, super expansive, there were shamanic pieces of the workshop, and I came to understand a lot of my own suppressed sexual traumas and just things that I didn't even know that I was going to be getting into going into the retreat. I was like in love with this musical artist, Ayla Nerio, and I just went to spend time with her pretty much. So the movement aspect was added bonus. So I discovered all these blockages inside of myself, and my real wedding to my now husband was just 2 weeks after this retreat. And at the end of it, I was integrating. I stayed an extra day after everyone went home, and I was speaking with the retreat owner, and she was like, it really seems like you're entering a transformative time in your life. Have you ever thought of like really deeply committing yourself to yourself? It sounds like that would be something that's very potent for you. And I was like, oh my gosh, I've never considered that. And she's like, you know what, I have this wedding dress that would look so gorgeous on you. If you want to do this, I could help facilitate it. And I was just like, those swirls of synchronicity started coming in, and I allowed it myself to flow with the process, and it wound up being just such a transformative experience for me.
Where did this dress come from that she had?
She just had it. I don't know if it's one that she got married in or something. It was large for me because I was, at the time, I was so severely underweight. And she just had it, and I tried it on. It was big and baggy, but it was the sentiment of, the energy that we were flowing with, and the size of it didn't matter to me whatsoever.
And as we go through the interview today, I know that you mentioned you have some photos that you can share with us. So whenever you want to share one of those, just say pause and I'll have you share your screen so that people can see the wedding dress or see other aspects of your really special day.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, I guess I might as well now. No.
Great.
Okay, so this is my screen, and these are the questions we're going through.
A little foreshadowing.
Foreshadowing. And this is me. So I guess I'll take you through just a little piece of, where I was at this stage in my life. I was on Kona in Hawaii. Uh-oh, how come? Oh, okay, cool. So I was just taking some little selfies to really encapsulate the space that I was in, because it was so gorgeous. I had never been to Hawaii before. It was so lush and green. And this is the piece. This is
Wow.
Yeah, we were on this really gorgeous deck, and the way the process started was that just put on this I put on this dress. I sat down and journaled for a while, and then I went over to this well of water that you'll see here in a little bit, and kind of like just self-reflected and said my vows to myself, and kind of just had this ritual by myself to myself. And she photographed all of it, and then I actually took my clothes off, and I took some photos just nude and in my body. this
Hmm.
is this is that space that I took that first photo right there. And I had never done anything like this before. Usually I'm just so uncomfortable with nudity,
Hmm.
and I allowed myself to just be free.
Beautiful.
I took a photo of the sunset because it felt very potent for me. And this is that well. And you can't see that I can see my reflection, but looking at the self through the reflection of water is a potent practice that I have in my own life. So I wanted to integrate that into the ritual.
Wow, absolutely beautiful. And as you're talking about your saying your vows, I'm tempted to skip to that part of the conversation. Are you willing to share them with us?
Yeah. And the vows that I had, I didn't necessarily write out and like state them to myself, but I did on the last day of the retreat. We intuitively were called to the middle of the space that we were sitting in, and all the cards were turned over like this, and we just grabbed the one that really spoke to us. So when I turned it over and saw the gorgeous art, and then on the other side it says healing the heart. This painting was inspired by the Big Island of Hawaii and deep levels of healing that have occurred for me while living here. It is intended to enhance healing the heart on personal, planetary, and multidimensional levels. Stories tell of a healing triangle that exists in this part of Hawaii. And so when I grabbed this one, I was just like, oh my gosh, how beautiful. And what we were to do is write this and then on the envelope say, don't open until, and it was like 6 weeks or 4 weeks down the line, so that we could remember and like have this wash of the feelings of what we had been through. And I think I'd just like to read this.
Yeah.
So it says, may our voices be strong and our whispers be heard. And those are some lyrics from this song called Wheel of Time by Aelenario. And I said, dear beloved, the synchronicities that align my existence are more plentifully fruitful as I allow myself to become still and at peace within my own existence. My freedom internally evokes a spirit so blindingly, brilliantly beautiful, one of a love I've never known. An integrated, grounded, healed bliss, unlike any I've witnessed. And then I put in parentheses, not true. I've witnessed it in every soul here. I open to receive messages from my guides in all their forms. Every interaction has a message, and I have a message for them. To encourage healing on a deep soul level will be a part of my process, a part of my life's work. As I give myself permission to grow, to play, to love, songs, words of sweet wisdom flow with grace effortlessly from my lips. The I-ness speaks to me. May I listen? You are brilliant, you are bold, you are beautiful, you are harmony. And then this little song came through, and at the time I was still just allowing myself to return to song because I had shut down my throat for like 10 years from an ex-boyfriend, and that's like what I wanted to do at this retreat. And I think it feels like an edge for me to sing it, so I will sing it. And it's just a short little song, and it goes like this. You are love, you are light, you own the night, you are the sky, you are the magic in light.
Absolutely gorgeous.
Thank you. I said, she is my seed, the dragon. Let her fire move through you. Be not afraid of her power. Believe it will be, and it will be. I'm so proud of you. Love, Britt.
What is your favorite part of those vows?
Honestly, I know I'm not sharing the entirety of my story, but I come from such a past of identity crisis, and I was really severely traumatized by severe bullying that I experienced when I was younger. And I really fragmented a lot of myself away from myself. And in that experience, I experienced for the first time those feelings of like wholeness for the first time since I was a young girl. And at that time it was 2018, so I was like 28 years old, and it was just, it was an absolutely monumental, profound life experience.
Wow.
To choose myself, because I was so used to choosing partners in relationship. Like I would completely abandon my identity and then I would just be whoever they were. My friends were their friends. I was interested in what they were interested in, and like reclaiming and being like, oh my gosh, I'm like me and I can have my own interests. It like sounds silly to say out loud, but I feel like so many of us can walk that path, and it's a wild time to realize that you don't have to.
Nice. We don't have to live by other people's standards or desires. We're allowed to have our own and to align with those, is what I'm hearing. Mm.
Mhm.
How has self-marriage impacted you?
I mean, it'd probably be easier to answer how it hasn't impacted me. Just because when, for me at least, when I chose myself right before I actually got married, being aware of my history of losing myself and like claiming the identity of my partner for, you know, the majority of my life, because ever since I got my first boyfriend at 7th grade, I never was single a day in my life. I just always kind of transitioned into new relationships. So, still to this day, I've not experienced singleness since I was like 12 years old, which is a big deal. But at the same time, um, just, yeah, choosing myself was a huge decision for me, really. And I now have a practice, because stating the vows and having a ritual, and then like how those vows and ritual impacts you for the rest of your life, it doesn't necessarily impact you unless you actually sit with that sentiment regularly and reconnect with that energy and that decision that you made. And that's something that I really value as a part of my life that I've cultivated. Like my life is a ceremony. I conduct my life in a way that I regularly sit with myself in resonant ways and really contemplate, like, what's moving for me right now? What am I feeling challenged by? What do I want to reconnect with? What am I ready to let go of? And it just gives so much more meaning and purpose and fulfillment to my life. Life just feels so big for me and it feels so good. I was always ready to like experience this depth of capacity, and I always wished that it was, something that I saw reflected around me, but I didn't. And when I had an awakening at 25, I was like, oh my God, life can be so much more than what I feel like it is taught to us.
What is this regular practice that you do?
Oh, geez. I mean, I sit with so many different types of embodiment rituals and ceremony and working with the moon phases, really understanding deeply, deeply, and working with astrology and human design and the chakra system and gene keys and so many systems that help us see ourselves more clearly. And then also integrating them with my, mundane kind of 3D reality of my beautiful family and my beautiful marriage and the relationship that I have with my dog and my community, my, like, yeah, just the people that I interact with, like weaving my rituals and ceremonies in with what my everyday reality looks like is just, it's presenting me with new opportunities to sit with ceremony in different ways all the time. And I facilitate a lot of this in groups and stuff like that too.
Yeah. So it really sounds like it influenced your lifestyle in a way that now your entire lifestyle is built around reminding yourself of who you are, what you want, what you desire, and having that guide you. Am I understanding correctly?
For sure. I would say it was a piece on the path. And since my initial awakening in 2015, like a switch got turned on. And ever since then, because of that past rooted in identity crisis, when I realized, like, oh my God, I can live like life with greater depth and meaning, I've been on a tireless, passionate, devoted journey since then. So,
Mm.
what led me to, Kona and going to sit with Ayla and Aya Papaya, who's the other woman that was facilitating the shamanic side of things, um, all of it is just woven together. It's like I went there to sing, and then I discovered sexual trauma, and then I married myself, and then I married Curtis, and then it's like this beautiful unfolding that it's like, where does one thing end and the next begin? It
Mm.
doesn't necessarily, and I don't like to even, pinpoint and be like, oh yeah, this is when this happened, because I witness everything on this really broad spectrum, and I'm like, wow, my life is just leading me to all these places that I never knew that I wanted to go.
I'm appreciating that because I don't think that self marriage is done in isolation. I think there is a build up to being ready for it, knowing it exists, being ready for it, and doing it, but then not just having it, as you mentioned, dissolve into the background, having it be another piece of the story that you continue to build out over time and that you actively build out.
Right? It's like a relationship, just like any relationship we have with our nieces and nephews, our friends, our beloveds, significant others. And the relationship that we have with ourselves psychologically is called the intrapersonal relationship. And just like any relationship, we have to cultivate the health of it. We have to constantly be nourishing it. We have to be tending it. We have to show up and put the gloves on them, know which weeds to pull, and know where the viruses are, know what bacteria are healthy and which aren't. It's like this really beautiful environment that we get to study and build up over seasons, and it's constantly changing, and it's never exactly the same from one moment to the next. And that's just something that I really love, and we can forget to tend it, and that's when we experience, the dark nights of the soul, where we feel so disconnected from ourselves. But then once we gain awareness that we're feeling the dark night of the soul and we're feeling so disconnected from ourselves, that's actually a really powerful, like, that's a best place that we could be, is discovering like, oh my gosh, I feel so out of alignment with myself. What even is alignment? Because in that dark space, we can really get curious and start asking ourselves questions that start helping us get out of that energy and like get curious as to what else it is that we want to experience in this human life.
Yeah. There's a great saying, I don't know quite where it comes from, but it says in relationship, you're either building it, you're killing it, or you're letting it die. There's no just maintaining. And I think that is even more true in our relationship with ourselves.
I absolutely think so too. And especially now in this time, I was so grateful that you contacted me for this interview, because our world is changing at such a rapid pace, and there's so much stress and fear and chaos all around us. And in this time, there's been no more powerful whisper than the one that I hear daily, which is, how closely are you tending yourself?
Mm.
Truly. Because in that, it's like we can't control anything that's going on around us. All we can control is how we respond to it, how we intake it, what we do with it. And it takes a conscious effort, and I love taking that conscious effort and really putting energy into this relationship, because I know it's like the only thing that I can really do in this life. And that is empowering for me. When we feel so like disempowered in so many ways about what's happening with the world, that's a way that I source empowerment.
And it seems like you're a person who's willing to get exquisitely dynamically supported. I think that's so important when it comes to self marriage and self love, because we can't do it on our own. And sometimes the best act of self love is allowing ourselves to be supported at a retreat or by friends or by our significant other. But I'm noticing that about you and just really appreciating how you seem to be so open to receiving that in order to source yourself.
Oh my gosh, I love that you mentioned that, because connection is what we as humans thrive on. That's what we thrive on, period. It's like these modern societies, yeah, they have their pros, but also it's like I'm looking here in my neighborhood and seeing everyone's houses sanctioned off. It's like we also have these very individualized bubbles that we can cocoon ourselves within. Everyone has their own lawnmowers and their own trimmers and their own this and their own that. Whenever we come from, all of our ancestors come from tribal lineages,
Mm.
tribal communities where we live together. We acknowledge that it takes a village to raise children and, raise the agriculture and raise the livestock. And that's something me and my husband are actually saving right now to buy a plot of land that we can build on so that we can invite people that are, with all these changes going on in the world, people that are not feeling so resonant in modern cities and that do want to reconnect with the earth more and be tenders of the earth.
Yeah. I'm sometimes I ask a question around how you took care of yourself leading up to your wedding. And it seems like because your wedding was a bit of a surprise for you, that it looked different. But I really get that you were taking care of yourself leading up to that point. And so I want to ask the question of what do you think matters as you're getting ready for self marriage? What sort of self care or extra self love could make that special day even better?
I love that question. Honestly, our ability to be honest with ourselves is something that I feel like is just paramount over pretty much anything, because the amount of integrity that we're willing to look at our lives with depicts quite literally and reflects back to us the nature of our reality, the nature of our consciousness. How willing am I to look at my shadows, the things that I, can be ashamed of or am scared of or have negative experiences with, or, you know, the relationships, the dynamics of relationships are just so complex, and the amount that we're willing to be honest with ourselves and say, like, how really are you doing?
Hmm.
Do you really know who you are? Do you feel a sense of fulfillment? Do you feel genuinely happy with yourself? Do you feel like you're expressing yourself in a way that feels resonant for you, not because you should or not because that person's doing it, but from a space that's sourced from the deepest part of yourself? Is there something you've always wanted to return back to that you have been too ashamed to feel back into? And are you willing to go there with yourself? That's a thing.
So, how would you recommend that people start to explore those questions in the time leading up to their wedding?
I mean, that's a great question. Questions are the source of growth in my experience. And as a Cancer rising, stellium and Gemini, my astrology geeks will know what that means. Cancer rising is a very self-reflective energy that really thrives on nostalgia and looking back on what we've experienced. And the Gemini energy is very interested in stimuli, interested in taking in information, interested in transmuting information. So literally just sitting down, and right now I'm in the process of writing a book called Hello Self that actually helps you gain awareness and map your own consciousness through the lens of the chakra system. It's a fill outable guidebook that asks you many, 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 many questions about yourself, because it's hard to say, how would you say, for people to start getting to know themselves. And it's really by saying, well, how do you get to know anyone? You ask them lots of questions, and you ask them questions about things that you're really interested to know.
I love it. And it sounds like taking some time to ask those questions in the time leading up to the self marriage, whether it's by going through a program, working with a coach, going through a book like yours. Like sometimes it's nice to have people to support you on formulating what those questions even are, because as we're getting to know ourselves, sometimes we're not sure where to look. We don't know what our blind spots are. And so having the questions or finding a person or an experience to give us those questions, I love that idea for people.
Yeah, I do too. And for years I have this email list, and I would send out, for the new and full moons that were circulating. Well, it's new moon in Capricorn. So we are supported in focusing our energies in this direction. And I would give journal prompts. And then I stepped more deeply into my personal transformation coaching profession that the business is building right now. And I sit with my clients and help them gain awareness over themselves all the time in that format. Or even just looking up in your local community and checking out moon ceremonies. If sometimes I feel like there can be this, like, if you feel like you're on the outside of like a spiritual community, when we think of things like moon ceremony, it can just sound so like serious and just like reverent and just so overly ultra spiritual, I guess is like the word that I can attach to it. But it depends, because there are so many different facilitators, and some of them you might go to a couple and they just don't resonate with you at all. It doesn't mean that moon ceremony is not right for you, but maybe just those facilitators aren't giving the energy that you are really thirsting for. So my greatest piece of advice is just to keep trying, because or even like a Reiki workshop, like it doesn't have to be a moon ceremony if astrology doesn't resonate with you, but just asking yourself to be guided. This is another really beautiful piece of prayer that like can lead us places that we never even could have imagined. And when we ask like, hey, I'm ready to learn something about myself, show me who to go to, and keep your eyes open for those signs, because they will start coming. And it's that age-old adage that says like, when the person is ready, the teacher, the master, the workshop, the whatever, the book will show itself. So just trusting and having faith in that, and showing up from a space that's willing and eager to learn.
Yeah. Beginner's mind. And if it's your commitment to know and love yourself, it wouldn't really be a commitment if we gave up after the first or second or third or fourth or fifth thing didn't work, right?
And it's a lifelong thing. Like, we're living these lives for such a long time. Don't just give it, 2 months of effort and then be like, I'm gonna go watch Netflix, binge Netflix. It's like, binging Netflix can be really dope too, but at the same time, you still want to be asking yourself those questions about fulfillment and whatnot.
Yes. With your story, I'm also really interested in how marrying yourself before your actual marriage impacted you. Can you say a little bit more about that?
Absolutely. So like I was saying about the whole morphing my identity into my partner, when I very first started learning about myself more deeply, I would come home from these transformative events and feel all this new vibrant energy, and then I'd come home and like he's still doing exactly the same stuff, and I was like wanting him to validate the experiences that I had just had, which was such a pitfall for me. Like, such a lesson in validation, because it can totally kill the integration process when we look outside of ourselves for people to tell us like, yeah, you had that experience. And it's a piece of the empowerment work to really like just stand fortified in what you experienced. Anyways, the way that impacted my wedding was that I came back and I really started spending more time with myself in a little cocoon, introspective cocoon. Like when my husband would go to parties and stuff, I would stay home and I would sit at my altar and I would journal. And I remember, just telling him, relaying to him the experiences that I had and him just intaking them like, wow, that sounds really, really like a big deal. Like, that's really cool for you. And when we were writing our vows for our wedding, to get married to each other, at the last minute, I added on this sentence that was the biggest edge for me ever. And I wrote, I vow to love, respect, and honor myself first, and not look to you as my sole source of happiness. And I was like, am I really going to be able to say that on my wedding day? Because a part of me, it's like all the programs start activating and they're like, that's selfish. You always should be ready to submit to your husband. I was raised born again Christian, and just challenging those things and being like, no, I know that I get lost. I know that I lose myself. So I need to show up for myself and verbalize this as we come together as one. I need to let him know I vow to myself to love, respect, and honor myself first. Because it's informed my marriage so much. It's allowed me to step into the really hard conversations and say, listen, something's not working here. And I told you on our wedding day, I put myself first, and this marriage is a reciprocal relationship, and I just want to know where you're at. Because from that space, we're able to say, like, hey, if we decide to part ways, like, if we don't want to endeavor this together, there's not hard feelings about it, because I am rooted in what it is that I want to experience in this life. And that might sound super triggering for a lot of people, but it's been what helps us get back in alignment, is having those hard conversations, which I never was really able to do before.
Wow. What would you say to other people who are considering self-marriage before a marriage to someone else?
Yeah, really, really get clear with yourself. Get honest with yourself. What do you desire? What do you know of yourself to be true in relationships? And how do you feel like marrying yourself first and really devoting yourself to your own health and well-being? How do you feel like that would benefit all other relationships, not even just a union? It's like when we do the inner work with ourselves, everybody around us changes over time. When we don't try to change other people, and we literally just live as a wellspring that is very clearly so elated with the fact that we exist in our own lives and we get to experience ourselves daily and we're an integral part of our life experience, that is a benefit of that self-marriage and self-work that I never anticipated to be such a huge change for everyone in my community. Each of my friends, I know that I've made an impact on them. Each member of my family, I know that I have impacted them in a huge way, and that it's helped them align with themselves more deeply too.
I wanted to point out to the watchers, listeners, that you gave such a great question at the beginning of that response. So if y'all missed it, just rewind. It's a great self-exploration question. I think it was something around like, what difference would it make for you? What changes could you see in your life? What difference might it make for your future husband or wife, or for the people in your community? Because it really is true that when we get more grounded in ourselves, it's an invitation for others to do the same, and the dynamics really do change.
They really, really do. That's the biggest benefit it's like I never would have imagined that my life could become what it is now. And I'm actually happier that way about it, because I would, like, maybe for someone watching this right now, they're like, oh, I want that because I want to be where she's at, which is perfect for them. But I was so blind. It's like I was like walking around like this, just like fumbling and bumbling. And that is actually a really great benefit of hiring people like coaches, because you can go directly to what they know that they've learned, and you don't have to do the 7 years of bumbling around that I've done.
So let's talk about critics. And I don't know about you, but when I married myself and it went viral, I had so much amazing hate mail. And I'm wondering if you had any critics, and if so, how you dealt with that.
Mm-hmm. Wow. I mean, I can't even imagine what that experience must have been like for you. I mean, like, can we just look at you for a second and ask, can you share a little bit about, like, how was that for you? Was it super hard for you, or did it help you just fortify and like close yourself out from other people's perceptions?
I talk about this in the book because I think it was a really important growth edge for me.
Mm,
And I knew the minute that I was going to be on the largest morning show in the UK that a lot of people were going to see this and have opinions about it. So I decided in that moment that hate mail was inevitable. And I decided that when it came in, what I decided on who I would be about it.
mm,
So was I going to let it impact me, or was I going to say like, wow, hate mail, like this means the word's getting out? Like, was I going to take it as a sign that actually this conversation about self-love and self-marriage was getting out to more people? So when it inevitably did come, most of it was no big deal. There was one piece of hate mail that was so thorough. They'd obviously done research years back into my online presence and Instagram, and they just targeted every single thing that could possibly be an insecurity for me, and that stung for a moment.
wow.
Yeah, it stung for a moment, and I was like, ugh. But then I just like I'd prepped myself. I'd gone over in my mind time and time again. I'd seen myself receiving the hate mail. I'd seen myself reacting to it in a way that was graceful and self-compassionate, and it just didn't stick.
Jeez. And thank you for sharing that, because in a world right now where so many of us can share so deeply and so vulnerably our own stories, and then it's also kind of this like, well, you release it and you chose to release it, so you're, open for whatever. you're you're open to receiving it all. And that's not necessarily, I feel like, well, whatever. We have to make peace with it. It's true. But and it can actually help to strengthen who you are, um, and how you see yourself.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I'm so lucky. Feel like I'm so lucky to have been, ever since my initial spiritual awakening in 2015. I started a new Instagram channel, and I just started sharing so much of my own personal transformation unfoldment and every little vulnerable bit in the process. And over the 7 years that I've been doing that, I have received a very, very small handful of any shred of negativity whatsoever. And I feel like I don't necessarily know why that is, but I can only imagine that it's from, like, there's a very childlike, sort of pure, innocent essence about the way that I write my captions and edit my YouTube videos. I have like 90 videos on my YouTube channel, and I've had Sacred Sister podcast, my podcast, for 2 years. There's this nature of the way that I communicate, and I think it just must turn a lot of people, either you're interested or you're not. And if you're not interested, it just doesn't seem like the depth that I like to go. Like it seems like it would take so much more time, that haters like generally just like, it's like, oh, I can be very long-winded with my conversation. So if you tune into me, you're down with my, realm of communication, how I like to express myself. And I think that might be a positive attribute as to why I haven't received very much hate at all.
I so appreciate hearing that because I think it's good to normalize. Some people will marry themselves and they will be showered with love and praise and maybe the tiniest bit of like challenge, and other people will have critics. I'm so happy you bring the perspective that like critics are not inevitable necessarily. And they exist. So it's good to, as we go into self-marriage, if it feels like we need to prepare ourselves for that option, if it helps us feel more grounded and it's an act of self-love for us to go through the exercises to mentally prepare for other people's opinions. And sometimes you don't even need to. I feel really delighted that that has been your experience. Like I'm sure there's some good juju you're putting out there that makes sure that you get all that love back.
I like to think so, and I think also it's so important to touch on this topic too, because I just said about sharing your story like it's almost an inevitable thing that people would do, and I want to look at that for a second, because sometimes I know for myself, I have chosen to do things, whether it's a yoga posture or whatever, and I solely do the yoga posture so that I can post it, and it's not rooted in that much of like a part of my daily practice. So being super immaculately aware of why you're doing something, and also whether you hold expectations, subconscious or conscious, whether you hold expectations over other people to perceive it in a certain light and for you to be responded to in a certain way, can be so huge. Because imagine you go through this super vulnerable process of having the ritual with yourself, writing a vulnerable caption, and then you're like, this is my big coming out, and you expect people to care so much, and then you put it out and you receive like crickets, like little to nothing, and then you can feel a type of way about yourself. It's just so important. You don't even need to share something like this. To be honest, when you contacted me, I thought this conversation was going to be about marriage. And when we got on the call and you said self-marriage, I was like, oh my gosh, how sweet. I never talk about this except for like the 2 posts that I've made on Instagram, that just that post, I talked about self-marriage. I've never even made YouTube content, blog content, never talked about it even on my podcast. So it's also this piece that it's like, I hope that it's for you and that other people out there don't feel like they have to broadcast it necessarily, because those sacred pieces, some of those super sacred pieces, it's like, why share?
Yes. Yeah, I love that. For my final question for you, how do you commemorate your self-marriage? Do you do it through an anniversary every year? Do you have framed photos? What do you have around to remind you of that commitment you made to yourself?
Oh, literally, I feel like, as we were talking about earlier in this conversation, it's like everything is woven together. So just the fact that I am who I am, and I show up as who I am every single day of my life, I feel like I'm literally connecting with that decision that I made every single day of my life. And I think that that integration piece, where you're really sitting with yourself afterwards and reflecting on, wow, how did that experience impact me? Over time, those tiny ripples become bigger waves, and then it can become such a big feeling of gratitude that you did that for yourself, that it just becomes this way that you look at yourself and you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe, like, I look at myself in the mirror after much like self-hatred work and so overcoming so much trauma, and looking at myself and being like, I can't believe you exist, queen. Like, you are amazing. And that's, it can all stem from that little seed of like having the idea to commit to yourself, period. Whether you're getting married soon, whether you just want to do it because you're out of alignment with yourself, like, who's to say where that seed, it's like usually the way I think about it, whenever you plant a seed and you don't even know what the seed is, you just show up with like love and tending care, and then it winds up being this like massive tree that you just never even knew existed, and you don't even know the name of that tree, but it's so beautiful and you're so blessed to be able to tend to this being. It's a feeling like that for me.
So beautiful. Well, thank you so much for being willing to share with us about your special day and the incredible life that you've built for yourself, that started before the special day, but that got to be a part of it and a part of the journey. It's so fun to hear the details.
Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to open up on this super sacred topic. And I just want to thank you so much for making the book, for sitting and doing these interviews. I can't wait to, follow what this turns into, and, let everybody that I know about it know about it.
Thank you. All right.